Dave, can you stop staring at me? Taylor said irritably, her eyes never leaving her phone. Her fingers moved swiftly across the screen, as if whatever was happening in the digital world was far more important than anything else. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, struggling to balance between frustration and pain. I just want to talk, I said, barely hiding the exhaustion in my voice. For the past 3 weeks, it's like you haven't even been here. She scoffed, as if I had suggested something absurd, and finally set her phone down. Jesus, Dave, what do you want from me? We talk every day. What else do you need? Honesty, I said, and at least a little attention. Taylor stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. Are you serious? You always blow things out of proportion. I work, Dave. I have a life outside of entertaining you. Entertaining? My voice rose. Is that what you think this is? I'm just asking for a real conversation. A real conversation? Fine. Here you go. What else? Do you want me to sit in front of you with wine and candles and tell you how much I love you? That's ridiculous. Her words hit harder than I expected. She used to say she loved my wine and candle dinners. I looked at her, and memories flooded my mind. Us laughing on the beach, arguing over who grilled the better steak, talking about getting a dog. Something's wrong with you, Taylor. You haven't been yourself for a while. She let out a short, hollow laugh. Maybe you're just looking for a problem where there isn't one. She grabbed her phone and headed for the stairs. I have a Zoom call with the girls. Of course. She didn't even stop. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, feeling the world I once knew crumble around me. Are you sure you want to know the truth? Mike asked, holding a beer bottle in his hand. We were sitting on his back porch, lit only by the glow of the streetlights and the faint flicker of the TV screen playing the Padres game. I don't know, I admitted, but I have this feeling that everything's going to hell. Mike studied me for a moment. Dave, you've been saying the same thing for a year. Either you fight for this, or you walk away. Everything else is just a waste of time. What if I'm the only one fighting? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He was quiet for a moment, then took a sip from his beer. Then you need to stop fighting. Easy for you to say, I scoffed. You're not married. And that's by choice, Mike smirked, but there was sympathy in his eyes. Look, she'll only change if she wants to. And if she doesn't care? He didn't finish, but he didn't have to. I already knew. Do you think she's cheating? Mike leaned back in his chair. I think you already know the answer. You're just too afraid to admit it. I tried to hold myself together. Tried to believe that it was just paranoia, that I was overthinking things, that Mike was wrong. But something inside me wouldn't rest. The next day, when Taylor was getting ready for her girls' night, I made a decision. You gonna be out late? I asked, standing in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her fix her hair in the mirror. Yeah, Jessica's celebrating her promotion, she said, not even glancing at me. We're having dinner at Café Sevilla. She looked stunning. Black dress, heels, makeup a little bolder than usual. For a casual dinner with friends, it was too much. Tell her congrats, I said evenly. She gave a slight nod and walked out. 5 minutes later, I was in my car. I kept my distance. The Gaslamp Quarter was alive. Crowded bars, street musicians, people hurrying to their next party. The neon signs reflected off the wet pavement from an earlier rain. Taylor walked confidently, never looking back. She didn't stop at Café Sevilla. She walked right past it, not even glancing in its direction. Maybe she's going somewhere else? I kept telling myself that, but deep down, I already knew the truth. Then I saw him. Tall, well-dressed, confident. A man in a dark coat stood at the corner, as if waiting for her, and she walked right up to him. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning out the city noise. They talked. Taylor laughed. Not the tired, forced laugh I had grown used to, but something real, something effortless. And then, he leaned in and kissed her. I gripped the steering wheel, watching as his hand slid along her back, as she let him hold her like it was natural, like I never existed. They walked into the Pindri Hotel together. I sat in my car, frozen. Cold seeped into my bones, but I couldn't feel it. This wasn't a mistake. Not paranoia. Not me overthinking. This was real. I didn't know how long I sat there. An hour? 2? I could have stormed inside, made a scene, but what would that change? Who would even let me into their room? What room? Did I even want to see it? I drove home. I didn't sleep that night. All I could see was her. The way she looked at him, the way she laughed, the way her hand fit so easily in his. The next morning, I made a call to a private investigator. A week later, a manila envelope sat on my desk. I didn't open it right away. I already knew what was inside. Photos, dates, times, Taylor and her lover, in restaurants, in hotels, in his car. I ran my fingers along the edge of the envelope. I could tear it up, throw it away, pretend none of this ever happened. But there was nothing left inside me that wanted to forgive. I held on, longer than any normal person could. For a week, I lived as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't seen my wife holding another man's hand, as if I hadn't held those photographs in my hands, hadn't read the investigator's reports. I smiled when she walked into the room, made her coffee in the mornings, asked the usual questions, knowing the answers would be lies. Taylor suspected nothing, but inside me, a storm was raging. And finally, the day came when everything was going to change. Taylor was getting ready for yet another girls' night. I already knew what that meant. I had seen the photos, read the reports, knew the dates, places, times. I knew when she left the house to meet her friends. Jessica suggested grabbing drinks at the Tipsy Crow tonight. "Hope you don't mind," she said casually, fastening her earrings in front of the mirror. I smiled. "Of course not. Have fun." She nodded, throwing me a quick glance over her shoulder, just to make sure I wasn't asking too many questions. I knew it was a lie, but tonight, I was fine with that. Tonight was the perfect opportunity to catch her red-handed and put an end to this absurd deception. But, to my surprise, this time was different. She actually went to the bar with Jessica. The Tipsy Crow, an old bar in the heart of the Gaslamp Quarter, dimly lit, with wooden tables soaked in thyme and whiskey. I watched from a distance, standing in the shadows, hidden by the crowd. The two of them sat at the bar, sipping cocktails, laughing, acting as if the woman in front of me was still the Taylor I once loved. I had almost convinced myself that nothing was going to happen tonight, that I was wasting my time, and I was about to leave, when something made me stay. Maybe intuition. "So, how is he?" Jessica asked, taking a sip of her martini, her eyes gleaming with mischief. I held my breath. Taylor smiled, twirling her glass in her hands before shrugging slightly. "Who?" "You know who." She laughed. "Honestly, Dave is boring me to death." My heart skipped a beat. Jessica smirked. "Then divorce him." Taylor shook her head. "And give up everything I have? No thanks. I've got the perfect setup, a reliable husband who pays my bills and a man who gives me, well, you know." I closed my eyes. I already knew the truth. But seeing pictures was one thing. Hearing it from her was something else entirely. "And he really doesn't suspect anything?" Jessica asked. Taylor scoffed, taking a big sip of her drink. "He's an idiot, Jess." She laughed, rolling her eyes. "Dave doesn't notice a damn thing. I could sleep with someone in our own house, and he wouldn't even realize." A cold chill spread through my chest. "Oh, shit," Jessica giggled. "And how long has this been going on?" Taylor thought for a moment. "Over a year." A blow. "And you're not afraid he'll find out?" Taylor shrugged. "And what would he do? Throw a fit? So what? In the end, he'll stay." She leaned back in her bar stool, a satisfied smile on her lips. "I'm using him. And you know what? I'm totally fine with that." I clenched my jaw, feeling the rage rise inside me like a burning wave. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stepped forward. Interesting perspective. Silence. The world froze. Taylor slowly turned her head. Her eyes widened. Her face drained of color. Jessica gasped, scooting away from her like she was contagious. I stood before her, watching the emotions flicker across her face. Shock, fear, and then something that looked a lot like contempt. "Dave, Go on," I said coldly. "You're using me. I'm a convenient option for you. Come on, don't stop now. I'm curious." She opened her mouth but couldn't force out a single word. Oh, what's the matter? Cat got your tongue? I leaned in closer, my voice low enough for only her to hear. Come on, tell me again how dull I am. How I don't notice that you're screwing someone behind my back. She trembled, her fingers gripping her glass so tightly that her knuckles turned white. It's not what you think. Oh, it's exactly what I think, I sneered. Because I have proof. Her breath hitched. I pulled my phone from my pocket and set it on the bar in front of her. The screen lit up. Photos. Her and him. Hands. Lips. Glances. Dates. Times. Places. She gasped, recoiling as if the phone were poisonous. You followed me? I laughed, low, hollow, devoid of any warmth. Do you hear yourself? I shook my head. You've been cheating on me for a year, and now you're the victim? Jessica silently stood up and stepped away, leaving Taylor alone under the scrutiny of the entire bar. People were starting to turn, sensing the tension in the air. Dave, please, let's talk at home, her voice wavered. I leaned in suddenly, making her flinch. Taylor, you've already said everything, I said, my voice quiet, ice cold. I want you to look at me and remember this moment, because this is the last time I will ever speak to you as your husband. Her eyes filled with panic. Wait. No. You never waited, never thought, never cared. Now it's my turn. And you were wrong about one more thing. I'm not staying. I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, her voice rose in desperation. Dave, wait. I didn't stop. Her voice broke into hysteria. You're ruining everything. I walked out. Walking down Fifth Avenue, I felt nothing but an icy emptiness in my chest. Not pain, not rage, just cold. The city moved on as it always did. Drunken crowds laughing outside bars, cars honking at stoplights, a street musician strumming something on his guitar. But it was all just background noise. My world had shrunk to this single moment. I did it. I severed the tie that kept me bound to this lie. But before I could get far, a voice rang out behind me. Dave. I didn't stop. Dave, for God's sake, stop. I closed my eyes and exhaled. Her footsteps quickened. And then, suddenly, she was in front of me. Taylor, her hair disheveled, her face twisted in anger, her eyes burning with fire. You're acting like a child, she shouted, clenching her fists. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. Oh, of course, she scoffed, narrowing her eyes. Now you're the hero, huh? Now you're the one walking away with dignity, leaving me behind. That's exactly right, I said calmly. She let out a bitter laugh. You can't just walk away. Why not? My voice was even, but inside, I was boiling. Because you're used to calling the shots? Because it's not fair, she screamed, clenching her fists so hard her knuckles turned white. You just went and destroyed our marriage. I raised an eyebrow. I destroyed it? She stepped closer, her breath ragged, her hands shaking, not just from anger, but from the realization that I wasn't bending this time. Yes, you did, she shouted, because you were never enough for me. I felt something snap inside me. She took a sharp breath and went on, almost hissing now. I wanted passion. I wanted to feel alive. And you. She looked at me with pure disdain. You were always too proper, too boring. I met her gaze and smirked. Passion? Don't worry. You'll have plenty. Just not with me. I turned away, but she grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my sleeve. No. Her voice trembled. You can't just disappear. I yanked my arm free and stepped back. Do you really not get it, Taylor? She clenched her jaw, breathing heavily. You always thought I was a fool. You thought I'd forgive everything, that I'd endure it all, that I wouldn't have the guts to leave. But guess what? You're not the only one who wants to feel alive. I locked eyes with her and spoke slowly. And you know when I last felt alive? She didn't answer. The moment I realized I don't give a damn about you anymore. Her breath hitched. I saw it. She had expected me to beg, to be broken. But now she understood. I was already gone. You can't, her voice wavered. I smirked. I can. I turned and walked away. Behind me, She shouted something, but I didn't care anymore. That woman could never hurt me again. Now, only revenge mattered. I spent hours sitting in my car, parked on an empty street overlooking the bay. The moon reflected off the water, a quiet reminder that the world kept moving forward, even though mine had just flipped upside down. I didn't feel anger, only resolve. This wouldn't be an impulsive decision. I was going to set everything up, step by step. If she thought she could use me so easily, she was dead wrong. Now it was my turn to play. By the time I got home, it was well past midnight. The living room light was still on. Taylor sat on the couch, legs crossed, a glass of wine in her hand. "Where have you been?" she asked, not looking up from her drink. "Out for a walk," I answered curtly, walking past her toward the stairs. "We need to talk," she said. I stopped on the staircase, exhaled, and turned around. "Go ahead." She finally looked up at me. "You're being dramatic. This isn't as bad as you're making it out to be." "Really?" I narrowed my eyes. "You've been cheating on me for over a year, but it's not that bad?" "Yes," she set her glass down on the table. "Because it doesn't change anything. We have a home, money, stability. I don't see why you have to throw all of that away." I stared at her, trying to figure out if she actually believed what she was saying, or if this was just a desperate attempt to keep control. "Are you serious right now?" I asked. "You really think that after everything, I can just pretend this didn't happen?" She shrugged. "People make mistakes, Dave." I let out a dry laugh. "This isn't a mistake, Taylor. It's a lifestyle." She sighed, stood up, and walked toward me. "You can still fix this," she said softly, almost sweetly. "You have a chance." I laughed again. "Fix it? You really think I'm going to fix this?" "No, Taylor. I'm filing for divorce." Her expression changed. For a split second, I saw something resembling fear in her eyes, but it quickly disappeared behind the usual mask of indifference. "Oh, really? You think I'll suffer?" Her voice turned sharp. "Dave, I don't care. I already have someone who makes me happy." She stepped closer, smiling defiantly. "You seriously think I'll fall apart without you?" "No, sweetheart. If you want a divorce, fine. I have Steve. He's been waiting for me to leave you." Something inside me twisted. "Steve?" I repeated, barely keeping my voice steady. "Yes," she smirked, her eyes challenging me. "And he's better than you in every way." She was waiting for my reaction, for yelling, for rage, for hurt. Instead, I laughed. Low, dry, emotionless. "That's good, Taylor. Really good. Because now I don't have to pretend anymore." She frowned. "Pretend?" "Yeah." I stepped closer, locking eyes with her. "Pretend that I still give a damn about you." Her face twisted with anger. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You'll realize what you're losing." I smirked. "I'm not losing anything." She opened her mouth to say something, but I raised a hand, stopping her. "No, Taylor. You're right. You can go to him. Forever. But just know one thing. When you walk out that door, you're not taking anything with you." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" I turned and headed up the stairs. "You'll see." The next few days, I worked with cold precision. I contacted my lawyer and gathered every piece of evidence I had. Photos, reports, text messages. Everything to make the divorce as swift and one-sided as possible. I started transferring money from our joint accounts into my private ones, leaving just enough to cover the essentials. I canceled all the credit cards she used. Every move was calculated. Every step was intentional. Taylor noticed the changes, but not right away. "Why isn't my card working?" she asked one evening. "Bank must have messed something up," I said smoothly. "Fix it." Of course. She didn't realize it wasn't a mistake. By the end of the week, everything was set. Taylor was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I walked into the room and placed an envelope on the table. She looked up at me. "What's this?" "Divorce papers." She stared at the envelope, then at me. "You're serious?" "More than ever." She scoffed, tossing her phone onto the couch. "You're an idiot, Dave. You think you can break me? I don't care. I have Steve." I met her gaze, unwavering. "Good. Then this won't be a problem for you." Her face twisted with fury. You'll regret treating me like this. I grabbed my jacket and walked to the door. No, Taylor. You will. Taylor yanked the zipper on her suitcase shut, exhaling sharply as a loose strand of hair fell into her face. Her heart pounded, not with regret, not with pain, but with anger and wounded pride. She wouldn't give Dave the satisfaction of seeing even a flicker of doubt in her eyes, not a single trace of remorse. This house, once her sanctuary, now felt suffocating, like a cage. She hadn't lost. He had. You'll regret this, she snapped, grabbing her phone and purse. Dave didn't answer right away. He just stood there, leaning casually against the doorway, hands tucked into his pockets. Calm, unbothered, indifferent. That infuriated her the most. Maybe, he finally said, but I have a feeling I'm not the one who's going to regret this. She rolled her eyes. I'm leaving for Steve. He's waiting for me. He has everything I need. Great, he nodded, unshaken. Just don't forget to remind him that he's paying your bills now. For a split second, her mouth went dry. Go to hell, she spat, gripping the handle of her suitcase and heading for the door. Already there, he murmured. She didn't reply. She didn't look back. She was walking toward a new life. The taxi pulled up in front of Steve's house 2 hours later. Taylor stepped out, rolling her shoulders back, taking in the cool night air. A new chapter. Freedom. Fire in her veins. She wouldn't be alone. She knew that. Steve was waiting. She knocked 3 times. No answer. Weird. She pressed the doorbell. Footsteps. Taylor swallowed, her heart giving an odd little lurch. The door swung open. Steve stood there, barefoot, wearing sweatpants and a gray t-shirt. His face wasn't lit with excitement, not even with surprise, just irritation. What are you doing here? He asked, not even making a move to let her in. She froze. I came to you, she said, forcing a smile. I told Dave I was leaving him. His brow furrowed. Why? She blinked. What do you mean, why? Steve ran a hand down his face and let out a heavy sigh, like he was already exhausted by a conversation that hadn't even started. Taylor, you did realize this was just temporary, right? A slow, creeping cold spread through her chest. You're joking. He shrugged. I'm saying what you didn't want to hear. You really thought we were together now? Her fingers tightened around the suitcase handle. You seriously thought I'd just sleep with you and forget about it? He smirked. Yeah. She shook her head in disbelief. Steve, you said you were happy with me. He nodded. I was. So I don't mean anything to you? He looked at her with mild curiosity. You're just figuring that out now? Silence. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Steve rubbed his chin, looking her over with thinly veiled boredom. Look, while Dave was paying your way, this was fun. But now? He shrugged. You're broke, homeless, and completely unprepared. What? You thought I'd rescue you? Her fists clenched, her lips trembling from humiliation. You're a pathetic asshole. He snorted. Maybe, but that doesn't help you, does it? Steve took a step back and shut the door in her face. Taylor stood there, stunned. She had calculated everything but this. And just like that, her world collapsed. She had nothing left. A few weeks later, I had just left my lawyer's office. It was official. The divorce was finalized. The court ruled in my favor. I had one. I was free. When I pulled into my driveway, the first thing I saw was Taylor sitting on my front porch. She looked wrecked. Her eyes were red, her hair a mess, her clothes wrinkled. I stopped at the door, crossing my arms. What do you want? She sniffled. Dave, please. I didn't say anything. She slowly got to her feet, hands clasped together like she was begging. I made a mistake. I smirked. You made a lot of mistakes. She nodded, tears spilling down her face. I can change. Her voice cracked. Dave, I was stupid. I didn't realize how much I needed you. I studied her carefully. And Steve? Her face twisted. He's not who I thought he was. I shook my head. Well, imagine that. What a shock. She sobbed. I can't be alone. And suddenly, I understood. She had never loved me. She had never loved him. She just didn't know how to be alone. I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch between us before stepping forward and looking her straight in the eyes. You said you were leaving for him forever. She frantically shook her head. I was wrong. I smiled, cold, calm, detached. No, Taylor. You were right. I pulled an envelope from my pocket and tossed it onto her lap. Her trembling fingers tore it open. She stared at the papers inside, breath hitching in disbelief. This is finalized divorce documents. She choked on a sob, unable to look away from the papers. Dave, please. I slung my jacket over my shoulder and looked at her one last time. Goodbye, Taylor. I shut the door behind me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free.